Today, we welcome Kindle Perry. Hi. She will be speaking to us today about, I tried to just sum it up a little bit, celebrating and cultivating our holy curiosity. I am very curious to hear what you have to say. So, welcome, Kindle.
Thank you. I'm curious what I have to say too. I have a whole bunch of index cards with various topics on them, and we'll see where this goes. I know that some of you have already had the dubious privilege of hearing my unique sermon style. So if you would just open your hearts, minds, and spirits, we'll get started. I'm going to start with a prayer that has become very important to me. And I realize that we all have a wide variety of things we're comfortable with saying and calling, higher powers, spirits, whatever. And I'm going to invite you to make yourself spacious as you listen to this and fill in your own words for things that might trigger you a little. The blessing of your words as you pause for reflection from the book 7 Sacred Pauses by Macrina Wiederkehr, living mindfully through the hours of the day. The blessing of your words as you pause for reflection. Gently lay your hands upon your lips, longing for the grace to speak only words that are helpful this day. Remember the words you have already spoken. You cannot take them back, so bless them and let them go. O word made flesh, stand guard at the gate of my mouth. Be my voice this day, that the words I speak will be healing, affirming, true, and gentle. Give me wisdom to think before I speak. Bless the words in me that are waiting to be spoken. Live and abide in my words so that others will feel safe in my presence. Surprise me with words that have come from you. Oh, place my words in the kiln of your heart, that they may be enduring and strong, tempered and seasoned with love and resilience. Give me a well-trained tongue that has been born out of silent listening in the sanctuary of my heart. May my words become love in the lives of others. May my words become love in the lives of others. So, the question this morning is, what makes a good question? And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And if anybody, well, I don't know if you save your question until the end or if it's good enough, you pipe right up. I looked it up online and then it got a site where it was survey questions. And some of the things were fairly obvious. There'll be a lot of this stuff that we all know, and it never hurts me to hear the same messages like lighthouses in the storm. And man, is it stormy right now. So if you already know this, celebrate that you know it. If you already practice these things, celebrate that you practice them. And we will all be building our capacity, I believe. A good question ends in a question mark. A good question opens up a conversation. A good question is neutral and free of bias. A good question is interesting. A good question is short. And a good question can be answered. When I was in school for spiritual counseling, I remember very well them and practicing as well. We had to do practice sessions and in preparation for being spiritual counselors. I remember very well that a good question isn't answered simply by yes or no. It's an invitation to open up conversation. And a good question is one that we don't already know the answer to. In other words, we're not trying to disguise a statement as a question. And in this norm-busting time of American politics, I've listened to many, many, many Senate and congressional hearings where most of the person's questioning time is taken up with making a statement. And I can find that extremely frustrating. We've talked about this before. We're going to talk about it again. That one finger out, three fingers back. I will probably make mistakes several times just during this 20 minutes of saying things poorly, asking poor questions. And I invite you to note with interest when I do that, because I do it all the time myself. I catch myself mucking up for lack of better language. And so that pausing before I ask a question to see if I have a hidden agenda with my question is an important instant for me, an instant when I can change what I'm about to do or say. So I know for sure that I can tend to disguise certain kinds of statements as questions, that I can ask a landmine question, trying to blow up somebody's point or what they're saying or their belief in something or whatever. I know that I have handed people loaded questions when, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. I've handed people barbed hooks. I'm asking a question, hoping they'll take the bait and lead to a point that I want to make. And I also have a type of questioning that I call the bubble burster. Like, this, you're not in the same reality as I am. Allow me to pull out my hat pin and burst your bubble. All of that stuff tends to come from up here, ego-based thinking. When up here offers a question, I try and find it suspect immediately and see if there's a question that's coming from down here, bubbling up from somewhere less in the home of my, I'm talking about me, ego. So one of the things I was noticing during the recent debates was that tendency to ask a question that was actually a landmine or a loaded question came up. Did anyone else notice that happening? If they watched the debate, did anyone else see the debates? Few people? Yeah. So I found that instructive. There was one moment when one of the debaters turned it from a discussion about ideas to a gotcha moment. And it really stuck with me, that feeling of the gotcha, because my stomach sank. It sank for everybody watching, for the participants, for the person who got. And I think it would be helpful right now to take a minute to kind of feel the difference of where things land in our body, where we might feel something elsewhere in our body than in our brain's thought process. And I'm going to invite everybody to kind of, if you're comfortable closing your eyes, do so. If you're not, then leave them open a little bit. But to think back, if anything happened this week where someone either asked a question or made a statement that went to your gut, that it went not straight to your head, not even straight to your mouth to react instantly, but it landed someplace else in your body. might have landed in your feet and caused you to stumble. Sometimes things literally land right in my knees because I feel knocked to my knees by what just happened. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. It may have squeezed your heart in some way or opened your heart in some way. And I'm wondering, while you're scanning your bodies, while we're all scanning our bodies, if we can find any place where we're bracing for impact as the election cycle winds up, as coronavirus numbers pile up in our area. Is there anywhere where you're bracing for impact and holding yourself vigilant for what you fear may come? I know I tend to feel it in my jaw and in my stomach. I'm really braced for being punched in the gut and knocked in the jaw. Way too much. Is anybody else? And if you feel comfortable sharing, do. But if you would like to just raise your hand or point to a place, which is hard to do. We can only see each other from the neck up. Yeah. Please, Donna.
Mine goes right to my throat, immediately to my throat.
Yep. I hear you. Looks like maybe Eileen's trying to, Eileen?
Trying to unmute. Yeah, I find my jaw locks up, but it's not because I'm going to get punched. It's because of what I'm afraid I'm going to say. I have to.
Ooh, nice. Lockjaw. Interesting. Yeah, thank you. Great distinction. Harry?
Well, my experience is that the expression takes your breath away. I've had that a number of times where somebody says something and it feels like my body has just stopped operating. And the most noticeable thing is I'm not breathing, but actually I'm frozen. It just traumatizes my entire system. That is so inappropriate or out of line or unacceptable or beyond belief that the entire system just kind of shuts down for a few seconds. And sometimes it's bad. More often it's bad, but occasionally it's good. But in any case, that's the way I experience some of those things.
Thank you, Harry. That is very, very helpful. Sharon, did you want to share something?
I have a problem holding back the tears.
So your eyes flood? Yeah. Well, you're making me do it too. I can feel that one. Ann?
Neck and shoulders. I keep
Ooh.
going back to the chiropractor and I realize that I'm braced because I'm afraid I'm not strong enough to carry the burdens of my family and myself.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Bunny, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to share something?
Well, I was going to say something similar to Harry. I feel my chest tightening and I recognize that my breath has become very shallow. But there's also another visceral feeling that I experience when it's something that is more personal, which is heartache. Just experience some kind of painful radiation around my heart area.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Speaking for Sandra, she loses her voice.
Point proven then. Thank you, Sandra, for speaking through Bill. Well, Harry said something that tickled one of my index card reminders here, and that is that sometimes he feels frozen, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's bad. And I want to think a little bit about that, that moment of being frozen is something we're seeing in Zoom a lot. We pounce right on it. Are they frozen if they stop moving, or if we can't see them in some way, making a facial movement or whatever, see ourselves doing that? And so this Zoom world that we're cultivating is so different. We see each other from the neck up quite a bit, and that keeps us in our heads quite a bit. And this that we're sharing now, this vulnerability, this kind of sharing that isn't just a spectator sport, is unusual. And I just want to stop and be grateful for it for a moment, this opportunity to come together and be really human together is a beautiful thing. So that instant of interruption of a cycle that we're familiar with is such a valuable time. It's so fleeting, the time between being triggered and reacting. I mean, I just got lessons in spades about this a couple days ago, just triggered by something, and I hopped up and luckily handled it with a teeny bit of mastery, didn't say or do anything that I would later regret. But nonetheless, I popped up out of my chair and skedaddled out to nature. And I later, praised myself for handling it fairly well, or not as badly as I could have at any rate. But this notion of interrupting the cycle of this very fertile instant when I can change how things would have gone or could go. Sure. How do we expand that? How do we cultivate a relationship with that very small instant to be more faithful to who we really want to be in this world? And it occurred to me again, having watched the debate, and I do have to give some kudos to Donna, because I would not have made it through if she hadn't loaned me a jigsaw puzzle to work on at the same time. I was putting pieces of that together and listening, and I noticed afterwards that the commentators had counted the number of times that each of the candidates had interrupted in the sense of talked over each other, made disparaging grunts, noises, comments, that kind of thing. And then I started to think about how many times they interrupted their own thought cycles, how many times they didn't say something that they might have been inclined to say, how many times they chose not to react so they could respond. And nobody was counting those of the talking heads that I watched afterwards. But I would encourage you, if you, like me, have a harsh inner critic waiting to hop on your mistakes, to also note when you're doing right, when you've done something that you're happy about that changes, when you've grabbed that little interrupt and changed the way that you responded. So I've come to call, I have, just like I shouldn't say just like everybody, maybe you people aren't treated to have this little crew inside talking to you, watching you, judging you, that kind of stuff. And I truly hope that's the case for you. But for me, I do. And I have realized that getting this harsh critic voice, this instant of judgment, that tends to yap a whole lot, and turning it into who I now call the commander, CMDR, catch me doing right. And that commander isn't trying to put me down, but rather to assist me in becoming, I want to be very careful because it would, if I get evaluative and say a better me, maybe a different me, a person that's ready to be present in a conversation, to be changed by a conversation. Not, I mean, I watched the debate. I knew they were trying to sway independents to vote in certain ways and score points that would pull people over to certain sides and whatever, pull them off their own. Never mind, I don't need to go there, I guess. But I do want to say that commander, catch myself doing right, catching these very small self tweaks is a beautiful thing. And you're probably hoping I have audio visuals that don't include the big ears again. No big ears. I have this picture of myself as a youngin'. And this person in this time doesn't know what to do. Not equipped to deal with pandemics, with presidents who are so far off of my own personal values and stuff. And this little person inside of me takes a lot of care, takes a lot of love, of acceptance, of recognition when I'm full up to here with trauma. I mean, it seems like, and if this is true for you, it seems like it's not just every day stuff is going bonkers, it's every hour sometimes, and sometimes many times an hour. And I don't do well with being gaslighted, lied to, manipulated, all that stuff. So several times a day, I'm telling this little one, I mean, literally, it's okay, honey. It's okay. Just go do something else for a little while. And I want, if that's happening inside of any of you, I want you to know that you're not alone. And I'm also interested in hearing about ways that you are comforting yourselves in these times. Anybody else? Uh-oh, I'm out on a limb. Nancy.
Yeah, I want to go back to your idea of commander, catch me doing right, because it takes me back to when we were rearing our two kids, and our son was the older of the two. He had a good friend, and they would get into all sorts of stuff, you know, and just kid stuff, teenage stuff, and sometimes it was vexing. And I remember the other mother saying to me, "What we need to do is catch them being good and let that be our perspective." And it really made a difference having that reality to overlay, or that lens to overlay onto whatever was going on, because you change the balance between criticism and support. And I think that's important for each of us, not just when we're raising kids. So what you said was very meaningful to me.
Thank you, Nancy. That's beautiful. Thank you. Gail?
You asked what we're doing to try to make it through this. Probably some of you know that my husband, Jim, has been a big hiker for many years. And has hiked a good bit of the Appalachian Trail. I've been out west and hiked and climbed mountains. And it was always sort of interesting to me that I didn't do that. But of course, I was either working or staying with our two boys. So I figured that was always one reason. But we've retired now, and of course, our boys are gone. And this summer, we've had the opportunity to do lots of hikes. I've finally gotten to hike on the Appalachian Trail here, and isn't it wonderful? This area has so many places you can hike. You can get somewhere within 30 minutes and hike on a trail, and you only see 2 or 3 people maximum. But I read somewhere that being in a forest brings you down from your head into your heart. And I think that's true. When we're hiking in the forest, you feel things from your heart, and you feel like you're not in your ego and not in your head. And it's a wonderful feeling.
Thank you. A walk in the woods does the heart good. Yes, yes, yes. Linda.
I escape into a book. Preferably fiction, but not always. Any rate, I've always found that reading not only gives me a certain peace of mind, but also patience. When I've had a tendency to have to wait for something or be very impatient, just reading a bit helps me deal with the issue.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, indeed.
One time when I was a child, a great aunt and I had different signals about where we were to meet up. And I ended up sitting at a bus stop, and I think I was about 8 or 9 for 3 hours while she rode every bus in the city of St. Louis looking for me. And when she finally found me, I wasn't upset or scared or anything because I had a very good book I was reading.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and I'm going to grab a little segue that you provided, Linda, as well, is that sacred pause, that ability, it kind of widens that instant of being able to interrupt. The sacred pause, when we ask a question, how long do we wait for the answer from the other person? That is another opportunity that I really have a lot of room to build capacity on, to be able to be patient and wait for the other person to respond. I was reading a novel yesterday myself, when I probably should have been tweaking my little sermon talk here, and in it, the main character heroine said, "Oh, that shattering sound was my assumptions about that person falling to bits." And I realized the power of that, how starting to fill in the blank when we've asked a question that comes from our hearts with stuff from our heads, or that thing that makes me invent stories about others instead of asking them, having the courage to ask the question and wait for the answer. Big, big, big stuff. Harry.
You just hit something for me. I was thinking about the word mistake. What's the opposite of a mistake? We don't really have a good word for it, but that certainly much of my life and practice has been looking for errors and trying to correct them, looking for things that I did that I shouldn't have done, and noticing all of the mistakes. What I haven't ever put much conscious energy into, well, I think it happens anyway, is noticing the things that I did that were right, that I'm proud of, that are good at the time, not sitting back and trying to find things to praise myself for, but just noticing them at the moment. And that this was children, rewards for things done that you want to do more of are probably as important as punishing yourself or beating yourself up or whatever, of things that we're trying to remember not to do that again. Anyway, that's a very strong point for me. I don't think I've ever put much energy into that at a conscious level, and I'm going to see if I can change that.
Terrific. Terrific. Yeah, I was thinking this morning about one of the great rules being first, do no harm in counseling and such. And I know some of you are trained counselors as well. And what if I expanded that second, do no self-harm? The Buddhists have this idea of the second arrow. And that's when the first hurt, my interpretation of it, not, I'm sure there are other interpretations of it, but when the first hurt, we compound it by beating up on ourselves or by being cruel to ourselves in some way. And many of us, I'm sure, have heard that I'm way harsher on myself than I ever would be on anyone else. If anyone, I would never talk to someone else the way I talk to myself. And that is something that we have the ability to make little changes in over time. So, Harry, more power to you. Thank you for sharing that. I would like to posit, and I don't know that it's true, that the opposite of a mistake is a lesson learned in loving. Self-loving, other-loving, word-loving. I realized the other day that when I very literally am looking at the vastness of things to be done in this world, the way this weary world needs love, that I lost my train of thought because I got worried I'm running over. Is anybody else watching the time better than I am, Amy? We're also just darn fascinated. Where was I? Sorry, I told you this would happen. Learning to love. Oh, I realized that, again, the ego, heart, spirit division there, that my ego is the one that's offering things I should fix, things I should do, all that kind of stuff, that those kind of inputs in the answer of how do I be in this situation? How do I make a difference in the world? A lot of those come from up here, and all the ones that come from down here say, love this, accept this, love this. And I am finding that really helpful to let go of my to-do list and to just say loving, 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 loving. Like the gerund. Just be the gerund. And one thing that I heard that I absolutely loved, and I'll maybe close with this. I've been questioning you and during this session. When you can't see the love, be the love. When you can't see the blessing, be the blessing. And when I get lost in the sauce, which is, as I said several times a day, standing back and saying, okay, how do I be the blessing? How do I be the love? And not waiting for this part to answer, but letting that sort of bubble up seems to make a difference. That last sentence in the prayer that you indulged me in reading with me or hearing, may my words become love in the lives of others. May my thoughts become love in the lives of others. May my actions become love in the lives of others. May my words become love in the lives of others.